File 16.
At the graveyard, the body of little Lisa was seized for debt by a carpenter to whom the mother owed 50 groschen for work done the year before. She had never been able to pay this, and was not able now. The carpenter took the corpse home, and kept it 4 days in his cellar, the mother weeping and imploring about his house all the time. Then he buried it in his brother's cattle yard, without religious ceremonies. It drove the mother wild with grief and shame, and she forsook her work, and went daily about the town, cursing the carpenter, and blaspheming the laws of the emperor and the church, and it was pitiful to see. Seppi asked Satan to interfere, but he said the carpenter and the rest were members of the human race, and were acting quite neatly for that species of animal. He would interfere if he found a horse acting in such a way, and we must inform him when we came across that kind of horse, doing that kind of a human thing, so that he could stop it. We believed this was sarcasm, for of course there wasn't any such horse. But after a few days we found that we could not abide that poor woman's distress, so we begged Satan to examine her several possible careers, and see if he could not change her to her profit to a new one. He said the longest of her careers, as they now stood, gave her 42 years to live, and her shortest 129, and that both were charged with grief and hunger, and cold and pain. The only improvement he could make would be to enable her to skip a certain 3 minutes from now, and he asked us if he should do it. This was such a short time to decide in, that we went to pieces with nervous excitement, and before we could pull ourselves together and ask for particulars, he said the time would be up in a few more seconds. So then we gasped out, "Do it!" "It is done," he said. "She was going around a corner. I've turned her back. It's changed her career." "Then what will happen, Satan?" "Well, it's happening now. She's having words with Fisher, the weaver. In his anger, Fisher will straightway do what he should not have done, but for this accident. He was present when she stood over her child's body, and uttered those blasphemies." "What will he do?" "He's doing it now. Betraying her. In 3 days she will go to the stake." We could not speak. We were frozen with horror, for if we had not meddled with her career, she would have been spared this awful fate. Satan noticed these thoughts and said, "What you are thinking is strictly human-like, that is to say, foolish. The woman is advantaged. Die when she might, she would go to heaven. By this prompt death she gets 29 years more of heaven than she's entitled to, and escapes 29 years of misery here." A moment before, we were bitterly making up our minds that we would ask no more favours of Satan for friends of ours, for he did not seem to know any way to do a person a kindness but by killing him. But the whole aspect of the case was changed now, and we were glad of what we had done, and full of happiness in the thought of it. After a little, I began to feel troubled about Fisher, and asked timidly, "Does this episode change Fisher's life scheme, Satan?" "Change it? Why, certainly, and radically. If he had not met Frau Brandt a while ago, he would die next year, 34 years of age. Now he will live to be 90, and have a pretty prosperous and comfortable life of it, as human lives go." We felt a great joy and pride in what we had done for Fisher, and were expecting Satan to sympathize with this feeling. But he showed no sign, and this made us uneasy. We waited for him to speak, but he didn't. So, to assuage our solicitude, we had to ask him if there was any defect in Fisher's good luck. Satan considered the question a moment, and then said, with some hesitation, "Well, the fact is, it's a delicate point. Under his several former possible life careers, he was going to heaven." We were aghast. "Oh, Satan! And under this one?" "Oh, there, don't be so distressed. You were sincerely trying to do him a kindness. Let that comfort you." "Oh, dear, dear, that cannot comfort us. You ought to have told us what we were doing. Then we wouldn't have acted so." But it made no impression on him. He had never felt a pain or a sorrow, and did not know what they were, in any really informing way. He had no knowledge of them, except theoretically, that is to say, intellectually. And of course that is no good. One can never get any but a loose and ignorant notion of such things except by experience. We tried our best to make him comprehend the awful thing that had been done, and how we were compromised by it, but he couldn't seem to get hold of it. He said he did not think it important where Fisher went to. In heaven he would not be missed. There were plenty there. We tried to make him see that he was missing the point entirely, that Fisher, and not other people, was the proper one to decide about the importance of it. But it all went for nothing. He said he did not care for Fisher. There were plenty more Fishers. The next minute, Fisher went by on the other side of the way, and it made us sick and faint to see him, remembering the doom that was upon him, and we the cause of it. And how unconscious he was that anything had happened to him. You could see by his elastic step and his alert manner that he was well satisfied with himself for doing that hard turn for poor Frau Brandt. He kept glancing back over his shoulder, expectantly, and sure enough, pretty soon Frau Brandt followed after, in charge of the officers, and wearing jingling chains. A mob was in her wake, jeering and shouting, "Blasphemer!" and "Heretic!" and some among them were neighbours and friends of her happier days. Some were trying to strike her, and the officers were not taking as much trouble as they might to keep them from it. "Oh, stop them, Satan!" It was out before we remembered that he could not interrupt them for a moment without changing their whole afterlives. He puffed a little puff toward them with his lips, and they began to reel and stagger and grab at the empty air. Then they broke apart and fled in every direction, shrieking as if in intolerable pain. He had crushed a rib of each of them with that little puff. We could not help asking if their life chart was changed. "Oh, yes, entirely. Some have gained years, some have lost them. Some few will profit in various ways by the change, but only that few." We did not ask if we had brought poor Fisher's luck to any of them. We did not wish to know. We fully believed in Satan's desire to do us kindness, but we were losing confidence in his judgment. It was at this time that our growing anxiety to have him look over our life charts and suggest improvements began to fade out and give place to other interests. For a day or two, the whole village was a chattering turmoil over Frau Brandt's case, and over the mysterious calamity that had overtaken the mob. And at her trial the place was crowded. She was easily convicted of her blasphemies, for she uttered those terrible words again, and said she would not take them back. When warned that she was imperiling her life, she said they could take it in welcome. She did not want it. She would rather live with the professional devils in perdition than with these imitators in the village. They accused her of breaking all those ribs by witchcraft, and asked her if she was not a witch. She answered scornfully, "No. If I had that power, would any of you holy hypocrites be alive 5 minutes? No, I would strike you all dead. Pronounce your sentence and let me go. I'm tired of your society." So they found her guilty, and she was excommunicated, and cut off from the joys of heaven, and doomed to the fires of hell. Then she was clothed in a coarse robe, and delivered to the secular arm, and conducted to the market-place, the bell solemnly tolling the while. We saw her chained to the stake, and saw the first film of blue smoke rise on the still air. Then her hard face softened, and she looked upon the packed crowd in front of her, and said with gentleness, "We played together once in long-gone days when we were innocent little creatures. For the sake of that, I forgive you." We went away then, and did not see the fires consume her, but we heard the shrieks, although we put our fingers in our ears. When they ceased, we knew she was in heaven, notwithstanding the excommunication, and we were glad of her death, and not sorry that we had brought it about.